Hey, everybody. Hope you had a wonderful weekend. We are back in the saddle for a very long and lengthy week of comic art, and narrative art, and illustration art discussions and sales. We've got the Comic Art Live show this weekend. So it is a very, very, very busy week. And kind of kicking things off is actually a illustration signature auction that we're going to be talking with Sarahjane from Heritage about that happens on Friday. So without further ado, let me bring Sarahjane into here and we'll get started.
Hi there.
How are you?
Hopefully it's going to be a long week that flies for everybody.
I hope so. Yeah, there's well, you never know. There's a lot of things going on around here, but you've got your signature auction. It's a one day only event, right? I mean, I think there's just over 100 pieces in it.
Yeah, so yeah, it's gonna be a one day event. It's a little bit of a departure from the way we've had auctions in the past, where we had a floor session with a live auctioneer and then a final session that's online only. This is just the floor session. So basically every item in this auction is, a special treasure to me, is one of my babies, I feel like, at this point, because I've enjoyed getting to work with them over the last few months so much.
Now, with a lot of these pieces, they're all in-house at Heritage, so you actually get to see them up close and personal. I mean, I know you typically, you've got to have the Heritage staffers photograph everything and get them ready for the auction. So that must be fun, right? To be able to get to see them, and they almost get to feel like they're yours for a short period of time.
It's exactly like being like fostering them, and it's good because it helps me, get the collector urge out without actually having to just spend all of my money on storage spaces.
We have talked about that in the past. So you don't have a large art collection, but you admire a great deal of art. And that's probably wise, I mean, because I look around and I have like 300 or 400 pieces in my collection. And I kind of feel my addiction every day, whether I'm on a stream or I'm browsing Comic Art Fans or something. So it's you exercise restraint very well.
For now, that is always subject to change, but for now it's working out for me.
Now, you don't have a lot of rest here, because I think after even this auction, isn't there another illustration auction?
Yeah, so we're gonna have another auction actually on December 9th. So it's going to be basically what we used to have all in one day, where we would have, like I said, the floor session and then a final session that was online only. We've actually broken out the online only sales to be their own sale, which means that we can offer them more, give people more frequent chances to, get involved in collecting. It's going to be a lot of fun too. It's going to have shades of the same things that you see here, a lot of paperback art, a lot of fun science fiction art, some pinup, just a bit. It's a little bit more, it's going to be a little bit just like, I think it skews a tiny bit more contemporary than some of the golden age stuff we have in this sale. And I'm really enjoying it because it gives me a chance to actually think about those pieces, like I said, on their own, and really think about what it means to just kind of talk about that as a group of art, instead of talking about this as a group of art and that as, well, if you like this, you might also like that.
Right. Now, when you're pulling these auctions together, do you really think about it as if you're curating them sometimes? Like maybe this one should be pushed back to the next signature auction so that it kind of fits better with the lots that are there, might attract the same kind of bidders to that lot, or how do you approach those?
I would think about it more in the opposite, that it's not that if somebody came in and said, I have a beautiful, wonderful piece of illustration art, I wouldn't say, oh, I think that would do better in a sale coming in 6 months. Mm-hmm. But conversely, if I have a really, just a really phenomenal, powerful piece of art, I might call you up, Bill, and say, hey, Bill, I know you've been thinking about maybe sometime in the next, 2 or 3 years offering this piece that I think will, attract the same collectors. There's never, it's an exciting time. It's exciting to have your work in a sale with work that other people are already buzzing about and excited about. And I think you see that a lot. But with that said, I think great art is always, people are always on the lookout for it, especially at Heritage, and especially among kind of the illustration art collectors and the comic collectors. People are always trying to see something they haven't seen before, see something that really speaks to them. So I don't think there's ever a bad time to put things at auction, give or take. I wouldn't suggest somebody does it on, Thanksgiving, let's say, but that's why we don't hold auctions on that day.
Now, do you ever have like I'll put it quotes, infighting at Heritage where somebody would rather have a piece in the in a regular comic art and illustration art signature auction versus in a straight illustration side of things, or is how do you divide, what's the dividing line between when a piece goes over here versus you just say this really belongs in an illustration signature auction because of the content? How's that work?
I mean, I think it goes back to a few things. One is the timing that sometimes, people want to say goodbye to pieces and then see them get sold as quickly as possible. And so there'll be a moment where we have a sale coming up and, it would fit anywhere. It would do really well anywhere. And so it's going to go in the next available sale. There are people who, maybe they started collecting in comics and the bulk of their collecting is comics, and in their mind this work really is in conversation with the rest of their collection and they want to see it sold with their collection in that way. And then I think sometimes there will be a thing where if we are talking about there is a great sale where we know that there's really strong examples by, let's say, the Hildebrandt brothers in an illustration sale, then we might say, it's good, this would be great with those. So we would suggest that. But in general, I think that I don't think there's infighting, because I really think that it's the opposite. I think that the more we get the opportunity to expose people to this art in different contexts that helps them be excited about it, the more, the better it does across the board.
Right. Would we ever see a Frazetta in a illustration art auction, do you think?
From your mouth to God's ears,
That's kind of where I was going with it. I was just curious, when you would when that crossover could happen, because a lot of pieces could belong in either or, right? And even during the weekly signature auction or weekly regular Heritage auctions, we'll see pieces that are clearly illustration art, not comic book art, and that's all. That's what I was trying.
And I mean, I do think with the weekly auctions too, one thing I'm excited to see in 2025 is really a little bit more illustration art in those weekly auctions, because I think the best thing that we can do, for collectors, the best thing we can do for the hobby as a whole is to just give people more chances to encounter this art, more chances to get familiar with it, get excited about it. So there's definitely no infighting, but at the same time, if I got the chance to come on here and talk about a Frazetta for, 5-10 minutes, that'd be a great day too.
Sure. That sounds good to me. So before we dive into looking at the preview that we've got for today, so you are still going to OAX, right? So
I am, yes.
Good. Good. I think there's maybe 6 people from Heritage coming, but we haven't gotten a list of who those 6 are. So I wanted to make sure you were still on the list.
I appreciate that. Yes, I am. I'm definitely still on the list. I'm so excited. I'm very sad that I missed it last year. I really wish someday down the line I would get to be one of those people who said I was at the first one.
Yeah, I mean there was a lot of people who felt that way, and a lot of people who went just because of that. You only get to go to the first one. You can't lie about it later on, because all of us who were there will know that you were lying. But yeah, we've got some fun stuff we'll be announcing this weekend too that I think will be of interest to you. We can talk about it after this weekend, just to kind of we're holding some stuff back that we're going to announce during our event, our virtual show that is held this weekend. We've got some cool stuff going on that we're finally able to talk about. But yeah, I'm looking forward to getting to see you again, and I'm sure many of the collectors who are in the chat will they'll be familiar with you now. I think we've had you on for this is the 3rd time, right? So
yeah.
You're like an old friend now to everybody.
Well, there's nothing more fun than meeting the people you've gotten to know a little bit online in person. So I can't wait. That's true.
Hopefully you can encourage some local consigners and whatnot to stop by the show as well. I would assume that's part of any time that Heritage or is going to set up somewhere, that they want to at least be able to get some of their clients to stop by and mean, I think it's a good opportunity. I think, when we
Absolutely.
start talking more about what we're going to be doing and direction we're heading at with things, I think, yeah, it'll be good. So, yeah, let's dive into some art. We have a lot. You picked a lot, but I mean, I went through it a couple times over the last couple of days, and there's not a stinker in the bunch that doesn't belong in this set to be talked about. Let's see here. Let me share my screen. There we go. All right. So this is Frank Paul, and it's a Pulp magazine cover, and it's like, the colors for me are everything I'd want in a good Pulp cover, and it's amazing.
I also think the background is everything that I always want in a Paul, where you really just see the kind of like hard sci-fi technical proficiency that he's known for. That there's just something. It's not just like the strong imagination of the scene itself. It's all of the little details that that made him just such a visionary and kind of such an influence, not only on future illustrators, but on like science fiction writers themselves too.
Yeah, this is really nice. And what was the date on it? 1940?
Yeah, so that's 1940, and it's for a very kind of more short-lived pulp called Science Fiction, which I think is also really, really interesting. Like you're already seeing his influence and the influence of his generation while he's still working, through the fact that we now have magazines that are called science fiction, when that's not even a term that was like in the vernacular, a couple of decades before when he was starting.
How familiar do you have to be with the pulps that these artworks are from?
I mean, I think that it's funny, because one of the things about pulp artists is that very often they didn't even have time to read the articles that they're theoretically illustrating. So they're not even that familiar with the contents of the magazines. So in some levels, you don't have to be familiar at all. And they've become such a part of how we think about things that even if you don't know why you recognize this or it feels familiar, you do know that it is kind of imagery that you are familiar with. So I think you don't have to be at all, but at the same time, I love learning more and more about pulps, and I love the ways in which all of the stories of how this kind of community of publishers was growing and competing and trying to kind of differentiate themselves in the marketplace kind of led to opportunities for different sorts of storytelling, different sorts of art.
Now, I wouldn't say we have a lot of pulp art on Comic Art Fans, unfortunately. It's great to look at, but do you feel like the buyers of this side of the illustration art were fans of the medium, or are they more fans of the art, do you think? As far as pulp, didn't they also collect pulp, magazines as well? Since that's a big collecting niche as well.
I mean, I definitely think that you're finding more and more that there are people who are now newer pulp magazine collectors, who are coming to the collecting of the original art. With this piece and a lot of the pieces that follow, they're from the Frank collection. And I know you had Jane Frank on at one point on Comic Art Fans, and I think a lot of these early collectors, they were in the fandom in such a way that there wasn't as much of a differentiation between what you collected. Like you cared about the culture that these things were emerging from, with a lot of the early series collectors of pulp art. And nowadays, when there's actually a little bit just collecting as a whole has gotten bigger and broader, I think people think of themselves kind of more in terms of like, I collect this thing or I collect that thing, in a way that certainly that was always true. There's always people who were kind of magpies and people who were really narrow, but it's more and more true that people who might say, oh, I'm only interested in this one part of it, and I don't find myself collecting the art. But you do see that a lot of times there are people who their interested in all of it. They come to it from all of it. Maybe they're collecting magazines first because the art's more expensive, which I think you see, on the comics side as well,
Exactly.
that people kind of graduate to the original art.
Mm-hmm.
But it's of a piece.
Right. I mean, that's what I was thinking in some way that's true, because it's exactly how most comic art collectors get started, right? They're comic book fans first, they're readers, and then they discover the art, and then away they go. They generally never look back. But considering pulps were, quite a while ago, and you wonder if the people coming to the hobby or the people who are collecting the art are more interested in it because of the art.
I think there's definitely some of that. There's definitely people who are pulp art collectors who haven't really gotten into reading the stories as much, who maybe they're familiar with kind of just magazine art from this time period, or, sometimes there's crossover, especially when you're talking about spicy pulps with pinup collectors, and they tend to not necessarily be as invested in the cultures of the magazines. But it's for me, I think it, like I said, it kind of feeds all of it. Like, if you're going to live with something forever, you want a deep understanding of it.
Definitely. Now, basically, an Alan St. John piece is like required. If you're going to be a serious period collector, you need one of his works in your collection. And there's certainly not enough to go around. But
I was going to say, or at least you need to be hunting for one, because I think there's a lot of people who consider themselves serious collectors and they haven't managed to pin one down. And this one's a really special one. This one, because it was actually like for, one of the people who really helped, who really kind of like helped protect and grow the name of St. John, who was he was the president of the Edgar Rice Burroughs Club, Vern Cornell. I never know how to pronounce his last name, but so this was, this I feel like it's one of the kind of most moving like depictions in some ways, with the softness of the colors, the real, I think it's got everything you want in one of these pieces. And then I really love the fact that it was kind of connected to one of the signature figures, again, in the early culture of collecting, and in the early culture of kind of bringing this whole genre to the fore.
Yeah, no, this is a fantastic example of his work. I mean, there's a few loose pieces out there, that aren't maybe as finished, but this one just has everything you want, especially the softness. I mean, the way he's delicately handled the tree, and just having everything kind of fall away in the distance as it gets lighter and lighter. It's just everything to me that the St. John should have. And it's a beautiful piece.
And I like the way it balances kind of the softness with just the the kind of the motion that you do associate with a Tarzan piece.
Yeah, no, without question. What was the year on this one? I'm 47. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
I know it's amazing that he was so good for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And this, I don't know. I don't. There are some pieces that I love them so much, it's hard for me to even kind of speak with any level of professionalism about them. I'm just like, but look at it. How would you not just fall in love with it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yellow is such a popular color in pulps. It really must have helped kind of attract attention on the rack.
Yeah, that was what they said, that it was the yellow was the color that people see first. I don't know if there's any science to that or not, but it's interesting because, as much as we were talking about how the pulps really all were trying to differentiate themselves from one another, they all just kept going back to the same thing. Let's put as much bright yellow everywhere as we can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is it is very nice. And you're right. It's too fun.
Yeah. And I mean, again, we're still in the Frank collection. And I think that we're still talking about these connections between these masterful artists. This is a Rudolf Polarski. It's an Argosy cover, and it's for, part of the John Carter of Mars series. So we're going back to to Burroughs stories, to these stories that are just foundational to how we think about kind of science fiction and fantasy storytelling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's quite remarkable. And but the Frank collection has always been amazing. I still haven't picked up the books that they put out of their collection, which is a shame. I really need to do that. It's been on my list for a long time. I should put that on my Christmas list and tell the friends, if you get me anything this year, skip the ties and socks, but give me those 2 Frank books. But
I think I think they're worth it. I think you'll hold on to them a lot longer than the ties or socks.
Yes.
But yeah, this one.
Now, how much of the 110 lots are part of the Frank collection?
The first 11, we started the sale off with them because I really do. You asked earlier about curating of the sale, and I think that we both do curate sales to the extent that we can, and where we try to make sure that we're presenting everything in a way that makes sense to collectors, and to also that whether you bid or you don't bid, if you pick up the catalog or you poke through, you walk away having kind of stronger understanding of why people who love this stuff. Mm-hmm. So I think kind of just going out from the gate and letting all these pieces just talk one after the other just puts you in a position where you now get to see kind of what was happening in this world in the kind of early mid 20th century.
Right. These pieces are so wonderful. Would be great to see them in a gallery setting in advance of the show. Just about the auction, just because how often would you get to have these many beautiful pieces in one spot?
Yeah.
Of that, but yeah.
We have we do try to, if anybody's ever, it's a little bit late now, but if anybody's ever in Dallas or sometimes in New York, we do try to have previews and have things on display. We also brought one of these pieces to New York Comic Con. It wasn't like having everything in a gallery show. We are trying to let people experience these in person as much as we can.
Good. You had that get together or something, right? The
Collectors Summit.
Yeah. Right, that's right.
Yeah.
So you were there for that?
I was not there for that. I only heard about it, but I've only heard good things about it for what that's worth.
Yeah, that's good. I heard they had good bacon wrapped shrimp. That was the talk of the show. So
I'm not sure that's what they would want to hear was the takeaway. But I'm glad that they had good snacks.
Yes, exactly.
In large groups.
No, well, it made us start thinking about OAX. What is the takeaway?
It's true. It's true. Is that going to be what you announce next week? What the snacks are?
No, probably not. We haven't talked about the menu at all yet, actually. But I know that's on our list. We're still trying to get the other things ironed out first, but yeah, this is a fun piece. At the end of the day, who didn't want a robot? Yeah.
I love this piece. I love the way that it's both a rotary phone and it's a clock, and there's just like the way in which so much of how we were talking about science fiction back then was this sort of terror of the machine, but yet this wonder about the machine that you cannot just get away from the fact that it's fascinating, that there's something just awe-inspiring going on here. And the man and the woman are making these kind of faces, and the robot just looks completely neutral, completely
doing anything wrong.
Yeah.
Oh man, well the robot seems to be winning. He's the one who's drawing blood.
Oh yeah, he's winning, but he's not even breaking a robot sweat. That's one of the things going on that I think these are just really foundational images.
And this is the conversation you wanted to spark in the potential reader of this Pulp. See, once they go through all of that, they're like, I gotta buy it now. So
Yeah, and this was actually the cover of the first issue of Fantastic Adventures. And again, just going back to, I know I just keep talking about differentiation, and I think that one of the things that title did was it really strove to kind of bring together different kind of types of storytelling that were happening back then. And you get that here, like I said, with like where it's both dramatic, a little violent, and yet kind of whimsical all at once.
I like it. It's almost like a Doc Savage cover.
Yeah.
Here we got another combat with a robot going on here. And again, what did robot do to deserve this? But who's the artist on? Oh, it's another.
This is another Robert Fuqua, and this is one of the fascinating things, that this was his, his pseudonym for these color pulp pieces, because of course, it was considered a little bit less classy than working for a mainstream magazine or, working on an advertising campaign. But today, this is what people remember him for. This is what people know him for. This is what people want him for. And yeah, I mean, just examples like this, they do not come on the market, and like they do not come on the market, and I'm really excited to be able to share them. I also want to point out one thing. This is going to be the first time you see this translucent dome on top of a figure, but it's not going to be the last. This is also a little bit of a genre convention that we're going to see pop up again.
Well, it's really it's quite interesting. Just the technique on this. It feels airbrushed, but it's pre that sort of work, but it's really well done. It looks like this is something that somebody would have put frisket on when they were working on it, but but they wouldn't have, just because of the time. So
and then you think about like how much they get the gleam of kind of the chrome and the metal, while still again making it seem like it's actually seeing combat.
Yeah,
a little bit Star Warsy like that.
All right, so this is an amazing piece. Obviously, I'm glad you picked it, put it up front in this. Anything by the Hildebrandt brothers is spectacular, especially from this era, the late 70s. I think it was 79.
Yeah,
this is those, their calendars and everything. That's how you got turned on to their work, and this is just it. I mean, it's beautiful.
Yeah, this is a fascinating piece. This is it's definitely one of the physically biggest pieces in the auction. It really, like, when you see it in person, it is just breathtaking and glorious. And yeah, I mean, it has incredible shades of their Lord of the Rings calendars, while still it's introducing a whole new suite of characters who were kind of their own fantasy characters. And they envisioned Urshurak, I do not know how to pronounce that correctly, I apologize, as maybe it was going to be a movie, maybe it was going to be a movie franchise. They had kind of like, they did this incredible world building. So all of these are original characters, and this was used in promotion, kind of like, of trying to get that movie made. And then in the end, it turned into illustrated novel, and there's some incredible grayscale work that they did for the interior illustrations of this novel. And it's a very fun little novel, to be honest. It's a very like if you like that sort of grand fantasy storytelling, it's a very fun example of it. And yeah, it's got like all the classic characters that nowadays everybody has come to expect. But in the 70s, we're still kind of not everybody was familiar with the notion that you're gonna have a woman with a sword and a guy with long hair and elfin features and all of those things. And yes, we have to talk about the background and how it's just intentionally evoking the work of Maxfield Parrish, and just how they're doing something so original while still being so part of the thread of 20th century illustration.
What is the size on this one, roughly?
It is 26 by 48.
Wow.
So, yeah.
I've seen a few of these paintings, they're from this era, like some of the Lord of the Rings, and they're just massive and not at all what you would never have guessed that they were so large. But,
exactly. Yeah.
But no, you're right. This would be fantastic to see. It needs to be in a museum or on somebody's permanent collection on their wall. So
yeah,
it's spectacular. Wow.
And if it's in somebody's permanent collection on their wall, they have to invite me over, because I don't. as much as I said I don't want to collect everything, this is going to be one that I'm going to be sad when I get to see for the last time.
Yeah. Well, nobody painted dwarfs, or I should say, I say painted, illustrated dwarfs quite like they did. At least, when they have a quality about them that feels realistic, and it's the big nose, it's the stocky figure, but they made something that wasn't, as a reader, you were just trying to imagine. They made it real, and that was so amazing, because that's so hard to do. Like the Peter Jackson movies did a pretty great job too. But early on, I mean, we're talking, 50 years ago, or 45 years ago, he's doing work like this, or they're both doing work like this. So amazing.
I mean, and then you think about the Peter Jackson movies made it real, but the Peter Jackson movies made it real. They made it real to conform to the image that we had all sort of started to develop of what this looked like through our exposure to these calendars, to our exposure to the work of artists like this. So it's just there's just these fascinating through lines when you start digging into this stuff, which is one of the reasons why I love it.
Well, congrats on having that in the auction, because that's spectacular. So we have a Bok piece.
Yeah, this is a Hannes Bok, and and this one, I mean, again, it's one that it again, also, he was an artist who was very inspired by Maxfield Parrish, and you can see that in the deep blues and greens. I like looking at this directly after looking at the Hildebrandt piece, because you really can see them exploring the same kind of questions of how you present figure in landscape. While, of course, this is very different. This is a very different approach to form. It's a very different approach to subject. But it's again, it is illustrating concepts. It's illustrating an idea. It's, this is something that he developed as part of a series that he was working on that was kind of looking at questions of the powers that shape the world. So this is known as the fifth power, because he had a series of lithographs that were known as the four powers. This one is kind of the legendary fifth that would have been part of that series had they decided to make it part of that series. And it's got these, it's kind of this biblical overtone with the way that the tree kind of looks like it's got a snake in it, and she's an Eve figure. And it's also just Bok is just another artist that his smaller work, his black and white work, comes up, every now and again, and it's always a hit. It's always really exciting to people. But the larger color paintings, you don't see them very often, and every time you do, it's, at least for me, incredibly exciting.
Yeah, this is almost 2.5 feet by 2 feet, somewhere around in there. So that is really large.
Yeah.
And this is from the Frank collection as well?
This is still from the Frank collection. The Frank collection is so good. I'm just going to rolling you through as much of it as I can,
Mm-hmm.
And here again, like I said, I did some foreshadowing. That was not the last time we were going to see this trope of the translucent bubble on a robot android figure. And this one is titled exactly what you would think it's titled. It's titled Rat in the Skull. And it was a Science Fiction Digest cover. And this is actually one of those things where the digests are smaller than the pulps. And this is much smaller than some of the, and Emsch is by Emsch. He tended to work on a smaller, tighter scale. And you can kind of see the way in which the detail comes through in the rat figure, you know, the way like all of those just tightly painted little hairs just keep coming through. So I don't know. And even this one though, you see that hint of that bright yellow, that they could not get enough of that bright yellow.
Right. Exactly. This one makes me. I came back to this one several times. Like this is just perfect.
I know he's. I go back and forth on who my favorite artists are, but you know, probably at least 1 month out of the year, Emsch is my favorite artist.
No, he really is amazing. I love he put his signature up on a book.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is great.
And that he took the time to even do all those books, you know, like with that much care.
Mm-hmm.
Like he was having fun with it. He was often having a lot of fun.
Well, this one's going to make somebody happy when they add it to their collection.
Maybe Brian.
That's right. He's scolding us. No, stop featuring things I like. We get that all the time, but I mean, we want to talk about the best stuff for the pieces we feel people will be most interested in.
Yeah. And so this is Harold McCauley. He too was somebody who I think is really known for the humor he brings to these pieces. You know, he's somebody who, this is one of his darker works, if I'm being honest, where there actually like is a level of, you know, there's fear, there's a little bit of like true menace in it. There's obviously like something, a little bit of cult in it, but it's still like, who could be afraid of that little guy? It's just a little guy, you know? And I think there's something really, really charming about the fact that his sensibility just always shown through, that like, I'm going to paint a weird little guy into my art. And you see that a lot with him.
I made it work. I'm drawn to the red that he used to kind of handle the shadow on her face. And I know it's, you know, this is the red from the background, but my goodness, that is such a warm flesh tone color there. It's crazy, you know, but it's so realistic. I mean, the angst on her face. I mean, this is a beautiful painting. I mean,
and that's the thing, you know, and of all the pulp and sci-fi illustrators, he really was the one whose work crossed over most specifically into pinup, and he also really had a lot of associations with the Sunbloom School in general, like did advertising work with Sunbloom, who, you know, really kind of created that question of the, you know, what you're talking about with like the warmth of skin tones, especially in the painting of a female. Like it's not, you caught exactly what's going on there, exactly kind of what makes him stand out from the pack, you know, in his own unique way. That there's it's just, he's painting not just beautiful women. Lots of pulp art includes beautiful women, often in menace, but he's painting beautiful women with the attention to detail that you don't normally see in this work, in the attention to detail and the style that you often see in pinup or advertising art. And that's really one of his signatures.
Oh, this one's fantastic. Yeah. Well, this one's just fun all around.
I know, and this one again, and I mean, I love, there's so many things that I love that are going on here. You know, like I love the just overt silliness of how they make her not nude. It almost, you know, it just almost feels like, I don't know. It reminds me of, you know, when you're watching like a TV show and they're using the world's weirdest props to, you know, make that joke, you know. And I love the way that, yeah, like you actually do see this connect all the way through to the fishing rod. And just, again, the way she's just like spectacularly beautiful. But yeah, it's funny and it's charming, and yet it doesn't get old, like something that's merely a gag.
Right. No, it's fantastic. It really is. What was it? The Austin Powers movie probably did it best when they were discovering.
Yeah, exactly.
But No, but yeah, this one's wonderful. It belongs in a fisherman's home.
I know. Well, I keep thinking the one thing that I feel like they missed an opportunity, because this is an Imaginative Tales Digest cover, and it's a cover of the March 1955 issue. And I'm like, that should have been a Christmas cover with that red and that green, you
It
know?
could have
Like,
been, right.
That's Christmas.
It almost could have been the cover of Field and Stream. You know? It's great. But yeah, this is McCauley again. But yeah, it's fantastic. It's so fun. I'm sure when we brought this in, the show is fellow artists and editors, that they all must have really, enjoyed it as much as we are right now.
I can't imagine anybody not enjoying his work. That's why I showed you one more, just for good measure. Because
I kept wanting to go back and read the description, and I never did, because I just, I have to know what this, what the premise was behind this painting, because it's just so outlandish. You have the pink elephant.
So I don't think I wrote it all in the. Like, I'm always torn, because in the printed catalogs, the more you write, the smaller the picture is.
Right.
Because there's only so much space. And this, there's so much great detail. You just you zoomed in on the the little stars and the elephant, which I think are a great detail. But if I remember correctly, this is a humorous tale that might be by the guy who wrote Psycho, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, again, talking about just how this is all one large culture. But I didn't write it down, so I might be wrong. If I am, forgive me. But yeah, this is just, again, just, this is how his mind worked, and how this magazine worked, where it is really, Imaginative Tales really lived up to its name, let's say. But it was about what we now call kind of like a retro futurist view of the future, where it's everybody's acting the way they would in the 1950s. This is from 1955, 2 months after the other one. And it's everybody's in some ways acting exactly like you would expect, very Twilight Zone-y in a certain way.
Mm-hmm. And yellow again.
Mm-hmm.
Draw people into the piece. All right, so now we have a pen and ink piece. That's Finley, right?
Yeah, and so having looked at all these others, not just talking about curating the sale, you also see that there's this obsession with these orbs, these globes and these orbs, and there's something going on in the way that we think about what's uncanny and what we couldn't understand, in terms of those circles that you just keep seeing coming up again and again and again. And I mean, I love the way everybody loves Finley. I don't trust you if you don't, but the way in which, like, he managed to even get that sense of the couple backing up, like just in the way that they're kind of like holding their bodies, so you can see them being a little afraid even without seeing their faces.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We talk about Finley a lot on the CAP update. I mean, it's not every week, but I'd say at least every other month there's an amazing Finley that's added to comic art fans. Yeah. And they all are. I mean, this one's actually looser than a lot of the ones that we'll talk about, we've talked about, but this is an interior illustration for the book, but still has all the kind of hallmarks of his inking technique. And it's a perfect example. If you're looking for that kind of a piece, this would be just fine as a starter piece if you're looking to get something from him.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice. But again, I'd have to say this, of all the artists we're probably going to look at today, he's going to be the most well collected from the collectors in our audience. I bet you there's got to be at least 300 or 400 pieces of his on our site, maybe even more. Here's another one.
Yeah. Here's another one, and this is interesting because this is a back cover, and you just don't see a lot of back covers come up that often. Mm-hmm. You see interiors, you see front covers, you don't see back covers come up, and I really love thinking about it as a back cover and this notion of like peeking in, you know, like you're engaging with the magazine itself. So this is an amazing stories.
Back there so everyone can see it. Yeah, that is nice. What year? 62.
Yeah. This one, I am a sucker for. If you couldn't tell from, you know, how I dealt with the Belarsky and the big red bird in the Paul, you put animals in something, and even that Emsh, I am a sucker. And these otters, just
you know what they are when you see them.
Yes, you do.
You have a lot of questions when you see this. So this is a cover.
This is John Schoenherr, yeah, and this is a analog digest magazine cover, and it was for something that was published in analog as it was called The Tuvula, but then it was also a science fiction novel called The Demon Breed. So it was it pretty much at the same time that the abridged version was coming out. They were working on the book, and this is a really interesting piece, because this is a story about a female hero. This is and just, you can also tell it's kind of from a different time. It's from a time that has a little bit more of just an ecological sensibility in certain ways. This like the late 60s. There's the reality of, or not the reality, but the way in which the attention that's being paid to the details of the real environment are just a little bit different. And that I think it's very interesting to like have taken us from kind of the earlier examples to what is happening in science fiction storytelling in the late 60s. And I think this is a super powerful example. It's already attracting quite a lot of bidding, and I don't know if it's because of the story, because of the woman, or because of the otters. I think it's because of the otters, personally.
I think so too. I mean, that's clearly the focus. I mean, the woman's in there, but the attention that John put into the piece is really on the otters, and much less on her.
Also, there's no yellow.
There is
not a drop of yellow.
No yellow here either.
No,
so
one little drop.
A little bit. You're right.
But it is interesting. This again is from 1973, and I think that that trend had just passed. And you can see a lot of things in this that do remind me of going back to the Paul, in the way in which the built environment is kind of laid out here, but it also does feel like it's so clearly from a different moment in time, even though in some ways, you've got another scene of kind of like humans in a settlement on another world. This is Mars in this case. This is from Sleepers of Mars, a paperback. Yeah, this is Chris Foss. I've been doing a terrible job of actually saying who the artists are this time, but yeah, this is a Chris Foss, and if you're not familiar with his work, I really recommend it. He's a British artist, really talented at this sort of kind of like space science fiction.
Well, it's just interesting. It has like a 3D modeled kind of a look to it, like when you see a wireframe and then things being painted on them and today, but it's there. I mean, it's in all these figures in the ship, and in a funny way, even in the background. And then this object, again, it's I'm kind of curious. I don't really know Foss's work that much, but it makes me want to go and at least look at some of his other pieces and see if that same kind of feel is there, because it's kind of out of place in 1973, but that's all I can see when I look at the art.
Yeah, I'm gonna dig into that. I think I might have some more coming up that I'll be excited to share with people. But yeah, and now I'm gonna be thinking through that lens about it.
Well, here we have a Jeffrey Catherine Jones paperback cover from 1970. See, now this is something that could have ended up in a a comic art signature auction, but fortunately for you, you got this one in the illustration auction.
Yeah, I mean, and this is it's not even a paperback cover. I believe that this was actually a hardbound book. I found that out recently, but yeah, this is from 1970. It was the cover of The Hand of Cain, which was Robert E. Howard, who is the creator of Conan, and so this is everything that this is kind of like everything that I think I love in Jeffrey Catherine Jones's work. That there's that it's almost swirling if you had to describe it in a word, that it's literally like through the way it's created, pulling you into the fantasy, kind of pulling you into the eeriness of it. And again, it's a very different color palette than we've seen before, or that we're going to see elsewhere in the sale. That's really unique to Jones's work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is from 1970 as well. So
yeah.
Fairly early. Really, really nice.
Yeah.
So you get to see one in person, right? I mean, I imagine like most of the pieces, it's got to be pretty impressive.
Yeah, this one in particular is, I think there are certain. It's interesting because you would think that with almost all illustration, you're going to be like aiming for it to pack the same punch on the cover, and then by extension, that would mean when you're looking at it, kind of in a catalog or online, but sometimes there's just no way to get it across. Just the kind of the details of care that went into it, and the ways in which the kind of like technical and expressive qualities just kind of come out about it. But yeah, I love this one. I love the way that they're like coming out of, almost they're coming out of this leafy, this sort of like leafy scene. And it's not just that they're, going through the environment, they're emerging from it.
Yeah. No, like you said, it's got everything you want in a Jones piece from this era.
And the faces are just those faces are doing it.
Yeah, Marcus said lily pads. That's kind of what I was thinking too.
Yeah.
Through the water, but yeah, it's wonderful.
This is what I get for it's almost 10 p.m. in New York, everybody. So if I can't remember how to say lily pad, you got to bear with me.
Yep, no problem. We're all rolling with it. Now here we have Tim Hildebrandt.
Yeah.
This is a paperback cover.
So this is a paperback cover. I love this. I love the story behind this one because, not only is it a paperback cover published for a book called Night Pool, everybody is fairly certain that it was created actually for a McCaffrey, like Dragon Riders of Pern book, The White Dragon, but for some reason didn't get used. But then not only did it, so you can see these characters who are so instantly recognizable from that series. And then it works equally well, in this other context because like genre conventions are genre conventions. There's a lot of stories about dragons and boys on heroes quests because that's, almost that's evergreen and interesting to people. And then it was a real favorite of Tim's. So it got issued in his cards. I think it also got issued as the portfolio cover of his like keepsake collection. He talks about the creation of it in, one of the books about his style. And I think it's a really just a very signature example of Tim Hildebrandt's work. And you do not as often see, his work on its own rather than the work of the brothers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this was 85.
Yeah.
So that's fantastic. Another really great piece. Schomburg.
I know.
Yeah, unmistakable when you see his work. But yeah, And we won't even talk about the yellow on this one, but boy, this is great. This is, what is the date on this one? Let's see.
So this is from 64. So it's Planet of the Apes before Planet of the Apes.
Yeah.
And I mean, there actually is some controversy where the author of this story, has thought that maybe some of those climaxes in Planet of the Apes were not a coincidence, let's say. But I can't speak to that. I am not a copyright historian, but I think it's a really, I mean, it's, as you said, it's instantly recognizable as Schomburg. It's just super powerful. I've heard that actually, if you go to Ellis Island, I believe that it's actually like been made part of, like, this imagery has been made part of kind of like a mural or like, some photo montage they have there. So it's signature and it's significant and just so cool.
Right. Well, it's better than Planet of the Apes kind of, mural on the wall. When you get to Ellis Island.
That probably wouldn't make you feel great.
No, it's fantastic. I love this one too. What is, let's see. So yeah, wow, gosh. And so it's got some bidding going on it. Yeah. Everybody, I mean, there's a lot of Schomburg's work out there, but yeah, this is a great example.
Yeah.
Not on CAF though. I will say that if I went back and searched, I know there's a lot more Finleys than there are Schomburgs on CAF.
Yeah. Maybe people just don't want you to know that they have them because they're like, people are just gonna keep calling me. People are just gonna keep calling me.
That does happen all the time. I hear it from many people. They want to. There's certain pieces they'll get asked about too often.
Yeah.
But yeah. So this one's just interesting. I feel like I should see this one, in my 1980s science book or something.
You nailed it. So this artist, Chesley Bonestell, he's known as the father of space art. And if you watch, there's a documentary about him that is great. And it just basically has just scientist after scientist after scientist saying basically like, someday we're going to get to Mars. And what we see on Mars is going to be what he taught us to recognize. And so he was a space educator. It was... that is entirely what he did. He was working in these really both like imaginative yet incredibly informed and realistic depictions of the universe outside of Earth. And so that's why this one it's the planet, it's the planet's to scale with the sun. I got to take his word for it. My science education was not that good. I didn't open those textbooks, but it's just, and it's great. And I think it really just, I like thinking about it in terms of what we've just looked at with all of that other art that is, entirely fictitious in these worlds that don't exist, thinking about how it was people learning about the universe outside of us as it really was that helped them form their images of the universe that wasn't.
Very true. Now, have you, I'm just out of curiosity, have you seen his work before? Because I'm not familiar with the name.
Yeah, I've been lucky enough to see it a few times over the years. And it's really good. This is also, these are pieces that I think they surprise you with how hard hitting they are in person. And they also surprise you kind of, they're not huge, but they're impactful. We have 3 of them. I think we have 3 of them in the sale. I only showed you the one, but yeah, we have 3 of them. Or no, we have 4 of them in the sale. The others are more specific kind of moonscapes that are great and everybody should check out.
Now here's a classic Pulp cover if I've ever seen one.
Yep, this is an H.J. Ward. I'm really hoping that I feel like we've maybe had a Ward in every sale that I've been involved in so far, and I'm hoping that gets to be a trend that just continues. And this is just everything you want in kind of like a 30s detective pulp, with the, damsel in distress, the goon, the bra, just for some reason in the middle of the scene, just so you remember that this really is, if you open the book, you're going to see something very lurid and unexpected as well. So I think this is a particularly both like strong and interesting one.
Yeah, no, I agree. The composition's really, dramatic.
Yes, yeah.
Here was this, as published, there we go.
Yeah. Yeah, and just very, very, very gritty, very dramatic, and just also like at the same time, I think really kind of true to the moment. Like I love that actually the room is just so nothing fancy. I think that's really interesting for a 1945 scene too, that it kind of like actually captures something very real, even while it's capturing something very kind of purposefully over the top.
That's a good pick. I'm glad you selected that one.
Yeah.
No,
And you couldn't talk about Doc Savage without talking about Doc Savage. Again, exactly. I'm hoping this trend just continues forever, and I get to bring you Doc Savages each and every time I show up.
Wow, this is a nice one. Powerful.
Yeah. And I like that it's so monochromatic, and just kind of it gives you the heroicness of Doc Savage while also giving you the creepiness of the Doc Savage stories that you don't always get in the covers. Sometimes you're just getting the like Steve Holland, like over the top hero, character, which I love those too. But I love that this just gives you kind of a sense of why people love the universe, not just why people love the character.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. It's wonderful. But it's everything. Yeah. Doc Savage's shirts are always like torn apart. And, but I mean, again, he's got the tomahawks in hand. I mean, it's just a really interesting cover. And this is from '68 as well.
Yeah. And I think, the Man of Bronze, just painting the whole cover in bronze, I think is a really interesting choice too.
Mm-hmm. And didn't Bauman go on to working in Western art after a while? I mean,
yeah.
So you have a piece that's got a Western theme to begin with, and that's where he ends his career.
Yeah.
For years painting Western imagery.
Yeah, and just I think it's not, in some ways it's not a surprise, because so many things they are about capturing kind of like grandeur and something that's almost like larger than life. Like, what is the West but the thing that's larger than life? What is Doc Savage but the man who's larger than life,
Right.
And this is maybe one of my favorite pieces, not just in the sale, just one of my favorite pieces. So this is James Avati. James Avati was really, he defined this sort of kind of mid 20th century paperback art that was kind of about just drawing you in to these kind of like the kind of just the intimate heart of a story in these very specific ways that just felt cinematic, and you can really feel that here. So this is for Sanctuary and Requiem for a Nun, which was William Faulkner. So not only was Avati this paperback cover artist, he created these paperback cover series that were about kind of taking these, people who we now think of as like pillars of the American literary canon and making them accessible to people kind of in mass market paperbacks, just kind of bringing kind of literature to the masses through telling you why you're going to be moved by a powerful story,
Well, the colors are fantastic. That peach color for her robe. It's just, the choices that he made here are just brilliant. the lighting on the man's face. I mean, yeah, it's wonderful. And because there's just a little bit of an impressionistic feel to it too, to kind of make it even more intriguing from this style.
And you mentioned the lighting. I mean, this is just lighting that couldn't exist anywhere. You know, this isn't just like mood lighting. This is, you know, this is kind of like psychological lighting even.
Yeah, no, I love this piece as well.
And again, we're just in the paperback covers, you know, because I think the paperback covers, you know, they have a lot of, especially Nappy. It takes a lot of. He also was working in digest magazines. He, you know, has a very pulp sensibility. Was a pulp artist, and this, I just think it's just such a great example of, in a different register, but that same sort of storytelling that you were just seeing that Avadi was doing, that just like, you know why you want to read She Had What It Takes when you look at this, you know?
Exactly. And that green, my goodness.
Yeah, I know. Again, finally, there's an accent color that isn't the yellow.
Right. Yeah, that is really nice. And this is from 1951 as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, just one more paperback cover from 1951 for good measure. This one is Art Colony. So we all know what sort of reputation artists had.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. But I kind of love him. I mean, I feel like he's got almost like an Archie sort of.
He does.
Style. There's something very like there's. You know, it's supposed to be so lurid and so naughty, but it also just feels just kind of goofy in a good way.
Right. Yeah, he's too happy. The woman in the back, I don't know.
She's just kind of quizzical, you know.
Yeah. Well, her hands are, you know, arms are crossed, so she doesn't seem too happy with whatever.
Yeah, I mean, but her arms are crossed. She's a little. She's not incredibly happy, but she's not making any moves, you know, to do anything other than look. And then the way I also love that what he's painting is, you know, so clearly like pinup inspired. So
yeah. No, it's a nice piece.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you said, it was a paperback cover too. So gouache on board and kind of large, 2 feet by 17.
Yeah.
All right.
One more paperback cover for you. I think this might be the last one. We're going out on.
You can't mistake a McInnes either, right? I mean, he's incredibly influential. Styles on his figures are always. I mean, you just know it when you see it. This is really nice.
And then, you know, but I also think there's like a little bit of a flex going on with them, because just having looked at that Avadi with that drapery a couple of minutes ago, just like the way that they're using fabric just to show you what they can do as an artist is always fascinating to me. You know, they're telling a little bit of a story through there too. And yeah, this one.
It's painted in 70 as well, the same year as the Jeff Jones. So it's an exciting time period for the arts. And, you know, again, it's a paperback cover here, but just having these artists who are just so influential on the people who would end up going on to do comic books, you know, as well. I mean, there's so many artists that cite McInnes or Jones as massive influences on their approach. I mean, you know, Jusko, Sienkiewicz, I mean, both of them would say that these artists, you know, really made them want to be artists and were just, you know, super influential on them coming into the field. So, yeah, it's always cool to see.
Yeah, I mean, this makes me want to be an artist. I think that ship has sailed, but.
Yeah, same here. Did you go to art school?
No, I didn't. I knew way early that I had no talent.
I had to go to art school to realize I didn't. But here's somebody with a lot of talent, Bob Peak, right?
Yeah, and I mean, this is you know, this is the sort of thing that I can't compare it to anything, because other than this is the sort of thing that reminds you why illustration art matters. You know, this is the final poster art for Apocalypse Now. This is the sort of illustration that you would have had to live under a rock to have not just grown up, you know, or spent a large part of your life since this movie came out, just being familiar with and kind of like having these strong associations with. And again, where, you know, I talked about kind of like psychological lighting and psychological colors, that this just shows you the whole world catching fire in this really intense way. I don't know. I can't talk about it better than it can talk about itself, but I just think that there's these moments where the work captures what it's trying to do so powerfully well that you can't disassociate. You can't ever know, is this so important because the film is so important, so I'm so familiar with this work? Or did the film become so important and I became so familiar with this work because this sort of image is so resonant and told me everything that I needed to know to get me in the seat at the first point?
Right. Yeah, it's it's an image that so many of us, you know it when you see it, you know what it's from. Even just by looking at the color palette, you could guess what film it's from, but it is just so well done and captures a moment that this is why we love art. You know, just the kind of rippling, hazy effect around the sun here. I mean, you know, it feels hot. You know, I mean, just everything. I don't know. I've really been always impressed by this painting. And,
yeah. And this is again, I mean, when you see it in person,
mm-hmm.
it is just so much more. It's moving me to the point, you know, as Wesley just said, like, that I can't really even speak about it, you know, terribly informatively, but I can tell you that, you know, the last day I was in the office looking at it during the preview, I just stood there for 5 minutes and looked. You know, it is the sort of piece that if you saw it in a museum, you wouldn't be surprised and you would stand there and look for a good long time.
Well, I mean, it would, as a collector, that would be a piece that would be pretty cool to
yeah,
you know, to be able to say you had that, to have that kind of in a place of prominence in your home. You know, that would be the conversation starter all the time.
Yeah. And so I just wanted to show you some other examples, you know, of the film related art that we have in the sale. This is John Alvin. You know, John Alvin is kind of as much of a master of crafts in a lot of ways as Bob Peak is, but he's really known for this sort of like heavy light is what it's called style, which gives you this sense that it gives you this sense wherein the dark is ruling the piece in certain ways, even though it's got just all of these like huge accents of brightness, that everything is coming from this place of drama, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And yeah, it's just a super cool Star Wars piece. I don't know. And you can't see enough of those.
Yeah, this is mixed media. You can see probably some pastels or something potentially for some of this, but yeah, it's a great illustration.
Yeah.
Let's see what we got next. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
This is fun.
I know. I think this is really fun, and I mean, I feel like this goes back to the conversation that I keep, you know, bringing up about how a lot of what we think of now as kind of what we think of now as kind of instantly recognizable ways of depicting characters, you know, that we would see in movies actually are coming from illustrations. And so this is one of the most recent pieces we have in the sale. This is by Grizz Grimley. This was for his illustrated version of Pinocchio. That version became the stop motion animation, Del Toro Pinocchio that just came out. And it's amazing to me that still in the 21st century, it is illustrators working in these traditional mediums, creating characters from their imaginations that are still kind of becoming these now universally understood versions of the characters, like what you were saying with Peter Jackson and Lord of the Rings, that these are things that just, it is a person, like doing one of the oldest human pastimes of just like trying to figure out how to draw something that was in their head that then becomes these giant worlds.
And yes, Wesley mentioned Pinocchio. Yes, that is correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, this is very nice, and I love the palette on it too. I mean, it's in the color. The coloring for this thing isn't atypical, but
yeah,
it's daring, and he pulled it off. It's great.
I like that word, daring, for it. Yeah, and yeah, it's really hard to tell.
Color. Color's hard. I always admire anybody who who pull things off like this, let alone have the vision to even try. That's the thing that's always impressed me. I can't. Sorry, I'm getting pinged by people. I should try to figure out how to mute my computer while that's going on. But yeah,
no, you should make sure everybody watching knows how popular you are. So especially you're spending the time with us. Come on.
Oh man, well, we'll work on that. But yeah, this is a great piece. I would assume it's probably gonna have a little bit of interest going on.
I think it really should. I mean, I think this is not something that's really, something like this has never come to the market before, which is also really interesting. And it's very unusual to get the opportunity to be in this moment when a classic is becoming a classic and collecting pieces that are associated with it. So plus it's just cool. I don't know. Really sometimes like I'm talking a big game, but really I just love this stuff because it's cool.
So that's why you're the right person for the job, Sarahjane.
But now we're back talking about pinup art. You can't have me on and have me not do that.
Mm-hmm.
This piece I think is really fascinating from a historical perspective, because this Nita Naldi piece was she was a silent film star who Vargas painted. And he knew her even before she was a silent film star because she was involved with the Ziegfeld Follies like he was. And this is from a sequence of pieces that he kept through his whole life. So he was working in the 1920s. He died in the 1980s. This was still in his studio. And these were his treasures. And then when it first got offered at a gallery exhibition and sold, it set the record for his work and really actually catapulted pinup art kind of into conversations about being seriously collected by people. So this just is one of the most significant Vargas pieces that I've ever seen. And yet it's just, again, so fun. She's so dramatic and beautiful and serious. And this satyr figure is so wild and weird.
So this would have first come up at auction in the mid '80s?
No, it wasn't at auction. It was through
a gallery.
Through a gallery sale, yeah. And yeah, it's kind of been in private collections. It's just kind of one of those mythical Vargas pieces that I don't think anybody ever expected to come up again. Now it has.
So is that because at that period in time, illustration art wasn't really thought of as something worthy of having it at an auction? So gallery.
I mean, specifically, the 80s really saw some shifts in how people were talking about illustration art. You saw some galleries starting to take it very seriously. That was really when you did see, some of the people who we now consider like the biggest names really starting to be talked about more in conversation with American art. Like, if you're talking about like Rockwell or Parrish or something, but pinup art specifically was also just the newest in the newest addition to this conversation. And then I would say even took maybe even a minute more for people to really start seriously talking about kind of the pulp art that we've been talking about for the bulk of this conversation, and like bringing that into the world where like people could talk about it in the same terms that they talk about collecting other sorts of art, and, you know, taking it through that kind of, you know, fine art, old school auction.
Well, the amazing thing, or maybe it's not amazing, is that clearly there were collectors that loved the work or wouldn't have survived this long, right? Even if they weren't as well known. You know, these pulp paintings, you know, that came out of the, you know, the late 40s through the mid 60s. I mean, you know, they were, sure, the artists probably had a lot of them, but collectors were still buying them too, and taking care of them. And that's why we still have them today. So, you know, even if it wasn't as well known, you know, as something to collect, clearly there were people who were very passionate about it and wanted to make sure that it was preserved for our generation. So,
I mean, and I think this is the great thing of it that you see in terms of, you know, a place like Comic Art Fans, or even, you know, like somewhere like Heritage Auctions, where we're not waiting for kind of a broader market to say this is worth collecting, this is worth being interested in. What's driving us to do what we do is just the fact that we love it. And the world catches up, and unfortunately, like, sometimes prices us out of buying the things we love as everybody else catches on. But it's not really about whether or not people who also, you know, are telling everybody what is meaningful in terms of the market to tell us that this should be important. The fact that we all resonate with it is what tells us that this is important.
well said. So Leroy Neiman.
Leroy Neiman, you know, just an adorable little femlin. I think this is unusual because you don't actually normally see these 3-panel Neimans. So this is a much more involved version of a gag for a femlin story. And, you know, femlin was his Playboy character, and normally you know, curiosity kills the cat, but in this case, curiosity got the better of the femlin.
Yeah, it's a fun piece. It really is.
And I think Neiman's another one of those people who, you know, a lot of people they grew up with, you know, his work kind of surrounding them. It was such a big part of our visual landscape, and it's fun to get the opportunity to have one, especially one that's as cute as this.
Yeah, no, I would even consider picking that up, but again, it'll probably be way out of my range. But it's fun.
But it's still in it now, maybe, you know.
Yeah, no, at this point, yeah, I can still be a player at the moment.
Yeah.
And then an Elfgren. I mean, again, you can't have a serious signature illustration auction without an Elfgren or 2 in there. Yeah. So this is fantastic.
Or 5, you know.
Or 5.
And this one, I think this might be my favorite in the sale, just because I love it. But I also picked it because here she is. She's in the kitchen. She's, you know, she's being saucy. She's being lovable, even though she can't cook. I think, you know, it's good that we remember that, you know, your ability to cook and your ability to be lovable are not always the same thing. But so I think she stands on her own as a great piece. But I also really enjoy her in conversation with the next piece that I chose, because, you know, you end up seeing something I think is pretty interesting. But yeah, we can just. So this is by somebody named Harry Ekman. And I wanted to talk about Harry Ekman because for a long time, people thought Ekman's so good that people thought that it was just a pseudonym Elfgren was using when he was, you know, working for outside of his Brown and Bigelow contract.
Okay.
So I think it's really nice seeing these 2 pieces where they have so much in common with the stockings and the shoes and also the food scene. And that, you know, that Elfgren is not the most expensive one in the sale right now. Who knows where it's going to end? But this Ekman is, substantially more affordable than an Elfgren typically is. He's not as well known an illustrator. So I think it's just amazing to think about the fact that there were so many people working at such a high quality. He's working at such a high quality that people literally thought he might be Elfgren, and yet it is so approachable and affordable comparatively. So I really love this one. And I love thinking about just how it's never a coincidence when somebody becomes, the king of a genre, like Elfgren has become the king of that genre. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean that he's the only talented game in town.
No, I mean, there were so many talented painters during this era. But you had to have, I'm sure they weren't given like the direction to kind of get their humor out there through the paintings. And so that really, they had to do that themselves. And
absolutely. Yeah. And Ekman had Ekman had a very rock and roll style. Mm-hmm. You see a lot of rockabilly sensibility in his stuff, which you don't see in Elfgren actually very much. Like even in his later works, it still tends to be very kind of like Girl Next Door in a lot of ways, or a little bit about a slightly older version of culture. And this, I think it's just she's delightful. And I think that the gags they are where people's personality does tend to come out, because we all do just have to express ourselves, especially artists, even artists working for hire.
Sorry, I was looking at the thumbnails across here. I thought that was the keyhole piece. That's funny.
Yeah. The Driven. Yeah. That's a guy who he couldn't be anybody but him. His signatures are these very pronounced legs and these very pronounced ways in which he sets the figure in the scene. Mm-hmm. That they're instantly recognizable.
That's really fun.
Yeah. And now, so we've looped back in. We've gotten so far deep into pinup that we've looped back into pulp magazines. So this is an artist, Earl Berge, and again, I really love this, and that goes back to like people thought of him as sort of a knockoff artist of this artist Enoch Bowles for a while, but I think he's got this real signature style. These, that deep black line, the ways in which he really incorporated these Art Deco elements into his work. I think it's just he's one of my favorite underrated artists, and he's not really underrated, especially his science fiction work is actually very like he's got some really fierce collectors for some of his covers and for some of his genre work, but his girl pinup work is people are still sleeping on it sometimes.
I like the heavy outline. Mm-hmm. You think about that as a very modern illustrator kind of technique in comics today in different ways, and then you realize it's been going on for 90 years as a technique. So no, I think this is beautiful. Yeah. And there's another one by Berge.
Yeah. And this is again it's so different in some ways. It's different in the color palette. It's also this is one of the most this is one of the most suggestive and like overtly risque magazine covers that's coming out. Like there were not even in the 30s, like even in the spiciest moment of the spicies, there weren't a lot of just like straight up topless covers. So this is a really interesting moment for what the pulps were doing.
It's great composition.
Yeah.
I love the fluidity in the background too. It's a fun painting.
Yeah. And I love her dance too. Like, I love just like the strength of it. She's so confident. Yeah.
I think they're both wearing yellow too.
Yeah. But also like a lot more deep green than you would, a little more deep green than you would expect. And this is also anytime you see somebody drinking in the 30s, that's always, they're always in conversation with Prohibition just ending, or if it's earlier Prohibition going on. And right. I think I like that again, this stuff, it's so it feels in some ways both so timeless or so just kind of out there, but that it's really grounded in these moments that if you want to go in and study it and think about it, you can really get deep into like why all those choices were made.
Yeah, this is very nice too. Boy.
And Georgie, I'm not gonna be happy until everybody loves Georgie as much as I love Georgie.
Well, it's fun, in contrast to that other, the piece we saw earlier, the Nun piece. Just the colors are like the exact opposite, but the figures are almost kind of in the same position. But it's just a different approach. I mean, the palette's it's kind of odd, but it works so well.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing about him. I really love, and that kind of I don't think there's anything that directly connects Georgie to comic art, but I do think there is something about the ways in which it purposefully defies a lot of what we expect about how you use color, how you use line, how you kind of come up with the, with the image within the scene, what it might be in the panel, that there is something very much storytelling first that I do actually associate with comic art in a lot. And this is, these are these interior magazine pieces where they do just so much visual storytelling in a really more specifically narrative and grounded and yet weird way than you see a lot of artists and illustrators doing.
Right. I mean, this kind of work definitely influenced, like, Frazetta when he started. Strip art and whatnot. I mean, the masculinity of the characters, the beauty of the women. I mean, he was doing it in pen and ink, of course, in those early days. But these are the artists that had to influence him and give him some inspiration in the way he treated his work. So it's a fantastic piece.
Yeah.
I love the signature in there. right in her robe is really, really well done.
Yeah. And I love her gown too. Her gown is just amazing. Yeah.
All right. So what is this? How Houdini Did It. It's the Man's Magazine. Okay. That's a very fitting cover for a Man's Magazine.
I think it's an interior, actually. This is
really?
This is an interior.
Oh, you're right. It does say interior. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Which is incredible, because that level of work for an interior true magazine. This isn't, when we were looking at Georgie, that piece, that was for, I actually hadn't figured out exactly where that was for yet, but it was for a magazine like Collier's or like the Saturday Evening Post or one of these magazines where they actually were paying a little bit more. They were giving you a little bit more time. True was, it's no longer a pulp magazine, but it's still it's not the most prestigious title. It's not the title that's giving you the longest time frame. And he's working just at such a high level of detail and just really, like, this was not an easy, the Stingray says, talk about photorealistic, which is very much what's going on here. It's very much what Lovell was known for. And he started out in the pulps, and he started out actually working also as a illustrator for, I think, the Marines during World War II, and really just got very confident very young in his style, and you can see that here. And I love this one.
That's fantastic. It really is, and it's just, everything about it is so well done. Even the water, the lighting.
I know the water might be the best part, actually.
How is that even possible?
Yeah.
I've been admiring everything but the water, and now I see that, and I'm like, shoot, that's too.
Oh, it's so funny because everything's so flat, and then the water's so glossy. That's such a choice.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And then maybe we talked about how Obama went from doing these, doing the Doc Savages, doing the kind of commercial work to becoming a Western artist. This is an example by Mort Kunstler, who I think a lot of people know for his men's magazine work, which, is very just like over the top, lurid, just all stories that say like how I survived my jungle attack with 18 beautiful women or whatever it is. And then he went on to really become just one of the most preeminent illustrators of the Civil War, with, again, just this incredible attention to detail. I can't tell you anything about everything that he's getting right in this piece because I don't actually know that much about the Civil War and all of the different details that he is nailing down to the button. I'm not even kidding. These are known for being just correct, literally down to the button on every uniform everybody's wearing. But I think this is a really amazing work. It's a really I think it just speaks to how illustrators are often, the most talented artists working in any given moment. And they go on and they take kind of like all those skills of storytelling, all those skills of really just, like I said, confidence earlier, and bring it to their chosen subject and do things that are really masterful.
You're not going to get any arguments out of me.
But there's still a little yellow hiding in the corner too.
There is. You gotta have it. Let's see. This is.
I know. I kind of got into these are just the things that I didn't theme them up, but I thought you had to see them. This is, again, just I like these moments where I see things I never expected to see in this field, and this is for James and the Giant Peach, which again is just it's a lovely, moving part of the stories of our culture that there's never been one that I've seen come to market before. And I want to make sure that nobody misses it, because there's got to be some James and the Giant Peach fans watching, because
we've all read it.
Yeah.
Or had it read to us.
Yeah. Or read it to somebody, or all three.
Exactly. No, it's a beautiful illustration. It really is. I'm not familiar with Nancy Ekholm Burkett or Burkert.
Except for that you are, because she illustrated James and the Giant Peach.
Yeah. I
probably didn't realize you were. Yeah.
I've seen her work before.
Yeah.
All right. What do we have next?
I have no idea what we have next.
Oh, this is a cool piece.
Oh,
we only would have done this like a week or two ago, but
I know. I did put it on. I did put it on social media for Halloween, and yeah. So this is a Saturday Evening Post cover, and this is. I know I've spoken before about how Saturday Evening Post covers are some of the most important pieces of illustration that got created in the 20th century. It was considered a feather in your cap as an artist to be asked to do one, and people really did their best work for them. Eugene Ivard, he was known for kind of nailing what it was like to be a child, and you see that here. You see kind of the mischievous, the innocence. You see the way we want children to feel, where they're kind of a little wild and a little protected all at once. And it's a pretty great piece. And it's Halloween.
Yeah. I was just looking at the, you can see some of the cracks in the paint, but I mean, what are you going to do, right? I mean, that's...
you know what? Honestly, I think that there's a lot of people who would get that restored,
mm-hmm.
and it's a really interesting from a collector's standpoint. It is a really this is, you don't often see these coming up on the market before those sorts of issues get addressed, and so it gives you I'm not going to use the phrase like bargain hunt, but it gives you this opportunity to go, wow, I never thought a Saturday Evening Post cover was going to be within reach, right. But it might be. And someday if I wanted to actually get it conserved, God, I could then I could then feel like I invested in something and came out on that, but I'm never gonna tell anybody, never, art is not a stock. You should buy it because you love it.
Right. No, it's a fantastic painting. You don't see it until you zoom in on it that it had those issues, but there's nothing. None of the cracks seem to have flaked anything off.
No, and that often happens with pieces where, because the figures they'll have more layers of paint on them. They'll be in the center, so that's not that uncommon to kind of see that a piece will have a little bit of issue in the background, but the actual scene itself will be just absolutely perfect.
Right. I mean, you can see it right there. I mean, the figures have very little damage because the paint's heavier, and then here it's not. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but just zoom in on. I want to talk about just her face for a little. Like, I've been thinking so much about what's on her mind. Like, is it like you're used to seeing the boy being the mischievous one. But she's like been the one who whispered in his ear, like, hey,
she's gonna get him in trouble.
No, put that fuse in that pumpkin. That's a good idea. That's a good idea, brother.
Exactly. He's gonna lose his hand in this event, but she's gonna enjoy it. Well, yeah, it's wonderful. So I was just curious where it was. It's 15.5 on the bidding so far.
Yeah. Which again, that's that's for a Saturday Evening Post cover. That is a really that's an approachable price. Yeah, and then these are great. This is another artist who, this is an artist again with the Ekman being Elvgren thing. This is an artist named Douglas Crockwell, who people used to mistake as Norman Rockwell because Crockwell and Rockwell, but really had his very own majestic take on childhood, and I just love these. I think they're great. They were ads for Friskies, believe it or not. So that's why the dog is so front and center. I'm going to show you another one after this, but and these are I did not know. Not only had I never seen this specific image before, I didn't know this whole ad campaign existed. So it was just a real delight of putting this auction together to just learn about, basically like a whole thing I'd never heard about, which is always the point. That's why this job is so fun.
Mm-hmm. All right, I have to see what the other one is now. So it's another Friskies ad.
Yeah. Another Friskies ad, but yeah. I think I am speaking of curating an auction. If I don't, that's how I ended the whole auction. Just, tell the story, take you through a whole day, and now you're asleep in your bed with your dog. What could be better?
Not a lot. I mean, but I'm taken back to that early auction piece we saw with the the rat and the robot and the couple in the door.
Yeah, I mean it's fascinating. Yeah, and that's what's so fun about it. That I appreciate the opportunity to come on here and do this all the time. And I hope everybody's staying with me. Give me feedback if I'm talking too much about anything. But I think that it's really fun to look at all these pieces together and think about them together for a little.
No, it really is. Yeah. And again, you always learn about an illustrator or two that you weren't familiar with.
Yeah.
Crockwell, I can't say I've seen their work before. I mean, I probably have, but I didn't know the name.
Yeah, no, a lot of people don't. But you can see in the bottom, he has this very kind of over the top monogram, and he started doing that because people kept mistaking him for Norman Rockwell. So he made this really, really clear differentiation.
It's almost a curse to have that name. I mean, when Rockwell was in his prime. So speaking of Rockwell,
I did want to mention that so the illustration art sale is not the only sale we're having on Friday. After the illustration art sale, we're kind of transitioning into our American art sale, which has a number of pieces by a number of great illustration pieces opening it up for kind of more golden age stuff, and specifically pieces by Norman Rockwell that were part of they were created for and part of the collection of the Boy Scouts, and they're now being sold as part of the BSA Settlement Trust. So these are, and the proceeds are kind of going to people who were survived abuse at the hands of the Boy Scouts, which is, it's a full circle moment where it feels like people are really taking these stories and doing something really meaningful with them, and kind of responding very well to being like, this American story is something that is so meaningful to me and something that we have to protect at all costs, and I think it's a really great thing that the sale is doing. And this one, I picked it in specific, not even because it's my favorite Rockwell, but because I think that the dog and the last dog just speak so nicely to each other.
Yeah, it's a very nice painting.
Yeah.
This is 58.
Yeah.
It's almost a little over 2x2, and so it's got to be a pretty impressive piece to see.
It's great. Yeah, I was looking at it in person the other day, and it's a really sweet one. I like the leaves a lot in it too. Yeah, but I want to say there's over 20 pieces from this collection that are in the sale, so it's worth checking them all out.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, you think of Rockwell and the hyper detail, and then he's really just using the leaves as a graphic element to kind of make the composition a little bit. I don't know. It kind of pulls the whole painting together. But they're not highly detailed, but they work really well.
And this is Rockwell doing something that Rockwell didn't do that often, which I believe this was calendar art. And calendar art often doesn't have a fully rendered background in the way that most magazine covers, of the sorts Rockwell was doing were kind of more fully rendered in the background and really more about the scene rather than the suggestion of the scene. Like, as you see here,
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which, again, there's a dog, because there's nothing more American than the Boy Scouts and a dog,
Yeah, surprisingly.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah.
No, 2 dogs. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I love this one. This one's got, it could not feel more home and hearth than, mid-century America. It is like a snapshot of a time.
Well, it's everything you'd want in a period Rockwell piece. Yeah. Cub Scouts, the Boy Scouts. Oh. Where's the apple pie?
Dog ate it. What do you mean? You don't see that? His tongue looks really red. That's why.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is huge. This is almost 3 feet by 3.5. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. Just kind of curious. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and I mean, we could go through Rockwell's all day, but I actually chose to end on this next piece, which this was my first favorite piece of illustration art. I don't even think I knew. One of the first things that I ever collected was old war posters for a minute. I really got fascinated, and I'm not a war person, as we heard me talking about the Civil War. I don't know much about war necessarily or militaria, but I felt like war posters were something that told you so much about kind of how culture saw itself, and just like how culture wanted to be seen, how it wanted to be presented. All of these things, you just learn so much about society by looking at a war poster. And this one, when I first saw it, I fell in absolute love with it. And when I saw this in person, I cried a little. I never thought I would get to see this painting in person. And it reminded me of why I do what I do, why I want to be a part of this community, why I, stay up late talking to you all, and why I want to hear all your stories. There's just something about when you fall in love with a piece of art that it changes you a little.
So this might be one you'd like to own, if you could.
If I could, yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's spectacular. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
the treatment to get that kind of gold like that. I mean, it's brilliant. What's the size on this? Because it's not in the URL, so I'd have to go back. Do you know how is it?
What is the size on this piece? It's a little bigger than, I mean, it's a little smaller than I think that Rockwell was. I'm pulling out the book so I can tell you exactly, because it's a good question that I did not expect to be quizzed on. So
it's not small painting.
No, it's not small at all. No, it's big. It's substantial. Most Leyendeckers are pretty substantial. Yeah, it's 40 by 27. So it's a big one. Yeah. And yeah, there's so much going on in it. I think like it's the opposite of everything we've been talking about all night with the bright yellows. So there's something about so much power being displayed through something so muted.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's very much it's very much about restraint, and yet it also has these things that they're very much coming from the fine art movements of the time. There's something very like Belle Epoque and kind of Art Nouveau hints that are in it. And yeah, it's very unusual for a war poster, which are usually just like often really realistic, a lot more like a lot less kind of about kind of like the surreality almost of what's happening here with the relationship between this Boy Scout, the sword, this symbol who's come to life, and the way in which the text is overlaid on it. Just it really does feel like it almost does have a relationship with the ways in which our comic heroes were then kind of envisioned and created.
It's amazing. I'm glad that you got to see it, right? I mean, not too many people would get to. I mean, you didn't have to chase it down, but but fortunately, it found you. That's wonderful.
Well, if anybody's in New York for the next, I think, 2 days, you can come to the Heritage office and see it before the sale. And then hopefully, this is one that I do hope ends up in a museum.
It should, definitely should. Wow. Well, again, you got several incredible pieces in this auction, Jane. That's wonderful. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. I take only a little bit of credit, but I do appreciate the chance to get to talk about it all with you.
Well, it's always a lot of fun, and do we have another date scheduled?
I think we do. I think we have a. You're gonna have me pop back on for a mini talk before the sale we have coming.
That's right. That's what it was. We were doing it. I was just trying to look at the calendar, and I was looking at Mondays and Tuesdays, and I'm like, I know we scheduled something.
Yeah.
But you're right. It was a different. I'll have to go back through my notes and figure out when that was. I know I've got it written down somewhere, but my Google Calendar, where I tend to put all my notes, it's not clear what I did. But no, this will be fun. I mean, there's a lot of lots in here that I'll just be very curious to see where they end up on Friday as well. So this is great. But as always, it's fun getting to hang out. I look forward to getting to do one of these again with you, and of course getting to see you in OAX. That's going to be wonderful. A lot of people get to meet you for the first time there.
I can't wait. Please, if you're there or you run into me anywhere else, come up, say hi, introduce yourself.
Yeah, I would. There's so much to see there. I hope you definitely get the chance to just kind of hit the floor.
Oh, I'm going to.
See, a lot of the artwork that's there, and I think there's going to be a lot of things that you'll be interested in seeing there. So it's going to be a lot of fun. But yes, we will all be watching Friday. But thank you again, Sarahjane, and as always, it's good hanging out with you at the chat. I'm glad you guys learned a little bit this evening about the illustration arts, and maybe learned about one or two. Now Cromwell, or Crockwell. Rockwell. Yes, yeah. I'm sorry. That's a new one on me. I'm gonna have to go and do a little research myself. But and who was the? Because I have to go back. But who was the? Oh, it was Foss, the
Chris Voss.
painted-
Yeah,
They had that kind of 3D modeling, weird kind of
Yeah.
thing going on at 1971. I want to learn a little bit more about Voss. All right. Well, thank you again. Everybody have a great night, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks.